challenge. I'm not very good at painting rooms, so God, you would never
What?
catch me doing it.
Painting's the easier one. It's mind numbing. I can't stand it, but it's
It's
the
just that
easiest.
every home improvement project starts out like this should be easy, and then it's like, oh, they wallpapered right directly on the drywall. That's a fun,
No,
unexpected turn.
no.
Like, yeah,
I grew
That's
up in a construction zone, feels like. My dad always bought rehabs and fixer-uppers, and we have done everything. Plumbing, drywall, framing, the whole deal. And at this point in my life, I feel like you, Jackie. I'm like, someone's like, well, we could do this. And I'm like, I know I could do this. And I know that I should not tell anyone I know how to do this because it's going to be 45 trips to Lowe's. And it's just like, good night, man. Okay,
Amazon
so
pretty
real,
much sponsored our entire redecoration.
we just left the tags on.
Yeah.
Brought to you by. Okay, so Jack, you used a phrase. Is it an official phrase? October surprise in correlation to campaigns. You used that phrase. Did that actually mean anything, or did you just make
Yeah,
that up?
like, well, in the newspaper industry, like, if it was the year before an election, October was always, like, a hot month because there was a lot of stories going on, there was a lot of sensationalism, stirring things up for the elections and that, so and October surprise, there's usually some, like, shocking information that comes out on one party or the other in October.
I mean,
Allison.
we've already had Trump's mugshot in Georgia.
Oh, God.
We'll leave politics for a different show. Um, uh, but we will
Coming
say
in hot, Aussie.
coming in hot. Aussie's and he's not even American. Like and like he gets he gets the label, Jack. I'm sure you've heard us call him like the world's best Canadian commentator on American politics because he knows it more than we do.
I thought that was Jordan Peterson. Just kidding.
He's not American. Oh, I guess he is Canadian,
Canadian.
isn't
He
he?
is Canadian.
Yeah, I
Although
wouldn't say
most Canadians are embarrassed to call him Canadian, so
Well,
it's
I
kind of
think
like
he's
Justin
more a
Bieber when he was
sociologist
13.
than a politico. He's more of a sociologist to me than a politico, but it's all drama. So, okay, October Sunrise, that made more sense. And folks, welcome Spark Sites or
Spark sites.
not
When did I get
Crypto
hired?
Bros. Not Crypto Bros. And it's Tired Ass Friday. We're all tired as mess. For various reasons. But we definitely want to dive into, if we touch on it, DAOs. We want to talk about NFTs. Jackie was talking about an NFT revival that we want to get to. But I say let's start at the top, which is what's going on with creator fees, Aussie, and what has been the ripple effects. So can you summarize when
Yeah.
this officially came out and what's going on?
So OpenSea made an announcement about like a week ago now, maybe a little less than a week ago, that they were not going to enforce creator fees on their platform anymore.
Wait. Pause. Time out. That is a very specific choice of words. Not enforce. Does that mean it's allowed, just not enforceable?
Yeah, so you can still have creator fees, but people can opt out of paying them.
What?
Yeah. So a platform that or like an NFT project like DGods that we've talked about a lot, Utes, or someone who was selling their Utes or their DGods could basically who was buying their DGod or a Utes could opt not to pay creator fees. And then the seller would get more money, or you can negotiate the price a little bit that way.
What about on Mint? Like if I'm Doodles and I'm coming up with Doodles for the first time ever, and I'm selling a Doodle, I take my fees that first time. But you're talking about on resales?
Yeah, so we're talking about secondary market only. Most people don't mint directly on OpenSea, and so
yeah, true.
Usually they mint on their own website or their own platform. So
what's the motivation for this? Give me a reasonable why.
The reasonable why is essentially there's become more and more competition between different marketplaces for NFTs, and one of the ways that marketplaces try to make themselves more attractive for traders, because traders want to pay the least fees possible. And so OpenSea, in order to basically beat their competition and make themselves more attractive to traders, they're cutting these creator fees to try and basically maintain their market share rather than improve their user experience. They're just trying to maintain their market share by cutting fees, and it's a kind of a short-sighted move as a result of kind of the NFT drought that we're in right now.
And Blur kicking their butt.
Blur is kicking their.
Why is Blur
kicking their
doing
butt.
so well? Why is that?
I mean, part of it that I've heard is just that you can do NFT loans through Blur on a greater number of NFT projects, whereas OpenSea's been a lot more restrictive on any kind of NFT loans. And I'm not 100% sure if they've even fully implemented NFT loans yet on OpenSea. So that's at least one of the reasons that
Jack,
I've
have you
seen.
done any business on Blur?
I have not. Regretfully, I should have when it was like I think back in like May or June, I kind of knew it was going to blow up. I also believe that Blur doesn't enforce creator royalties, or if they do, it's super low. Um,
I
let's
thought it
see
was their
here.
platform fees were low. So I think uh, Blur only charges, I think it's like 1%, whereas OpenSea platform fees are 2.5%. So I think that was one thing that I know. I don't know if it was not
Okay.
enforcing creator royalties. I thought it was the other way around, was that they were cutting their own fees rather than cutting creator fees.
I think it's some of that, but it's also the platform only enforces a 0.5% minimum creator royalty with the option for traders to pay more.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Kind
it's
of a
still that
hybrid.
optional, which as someone who creates my own NFT art and like has listed assets and sold like things like that. I mean, I just think it's crazy that you can program in there that, you want 3% or 5% and then it can be optional. It just seems like this was a thesis that NFTs were like built on and sold on, that creator royalties were, I mean, this is things people evangelized for years before the
Yeah.
NFT boom. However, at the same time, OpenSea is sort of like, it's OpenSea is the NFTs what Coinbase is to crypto. It's where it's an entry point for a lot of people. We used to joke around and say like OpenSea was like the wet market. It'll sell anything. It's the eBay of NFTs. So they have different considerations than like a foundation or, Maker's Place or something that's trying to niche down on specific types of NFTs. So I think overall it's going to be healthy, and something we said earlier before we got on live, as much as purists in the Web3 space, we don't want to see things get muddled up and our ideals torn apart and things like that. But at the same time, we need traders, we need speculation, we need an injection of money in the NFT space, and this can sort of bring that about. So
You mentioned that. I liked that statement. We speculation brings injection. Is that because artists are starving as they always have been? Or like you called for an NFT boom, and maybe before we go there, Aussie, were you in line with this or were you countering?
I'm going to counter this a little bit. I think this is a short-sighted move.
100%.
This is a absolutely short-sighted move, saying that we need speculators and we need everything right now. Because if we think about it, we're in an NFT drought. We've talked about on this show multiple times, our NFT's dead, and essentially we're approaching September and October. And if you didn't join our Twitter space on Tuesday, I talked about how that's kind of, I mean, we have our summer lull and then we have our September October drop, and so we've started to feel that drop. We had that first drop early last week, and now we're talking about, oh, hey, we need to cut fees to help increase speculation. Where, do you know what? Maybe we just wait, because we're actually just going to disincentivize artists from building on these platforms and launching NFTs and other projects, because guess what? Their creator fees that have been so lauded are not going to be respected anyways. And so
Are you suggesting OpenSea is cutting creator fees to generate volume?
yes, absolutely. Because
Is that what they're saying they're doing?
No, that's not what they're saying they're doing, but they're 100%. That's the only incentive they've got to do this is to ensure competition, so to remain competitive against Blur and any other competitor, and to help encourage speculation on projects on their platform, because margins are tighter because there's less liquidity, because there's less trading going on overall. And so we're seeing projects. I mean, I still think a lot of what's gone on with DGods was all a move to generate creator fees to help boost their treasury.
Well, I mean, I agree with that. Jackie, you're shaking your head emphatically. I recognize that this might create volume, but the question I asked that you seemed emphatic about, Jackie, was, is this why OpenSea is doing it to generate like an increased volume and increased use? Why wouldn't they cut their own fees as opposed to creator
They did
fees?
for a little bit.
Did
Yeah,
they?
when Blur initially announced that they Blur announced their airdrop, they at one point had their own Blur fees at like 0%, and so OpenSea did the same to generate, and that kind of created a little bit of a boom in May and June kind of thing. And then once those fees kind of went back to normal, we've kind of re-entered that kind of bust or dust town territory.
Do we think this will work, Jackie?
Well, I mean, first of all, I want to state that like I don't know the motivation behind OpenSea's like business
Sure.
decisions.
Yeah.
I just know that money is cyclical, it's energetic, it moves, it flows, it has to. So I think doing things like this, whether it's Coinbase or OpenSea, they're going to be the public example, I guess,
Mm.
of where regulation's going to move, how we're going to do these things. So uh, I think people that deal with money and deal with assets, these are the games we play on the road to making things more real and more sticky and more three-dimensional, I suppose. Maybe that's kind of outlandish to say, but it's just, I mean, this is just what happens in my opinion. Like I'm not sitting here like advocating for it. Like I just said, I am a
That was my
creator.
next question. I
I
was like,
would
wait a
love that,
minute.
I think long term it weighs the business side of this stuff towards traders and towards, people that have always kind of controlled that flow of energy and of money and that. But, I also know a lot of, like you mentioned, starving artists. I mean, I think we can all agree we're happier in bull markets. We're happier when the money is flowing. And I mean, people can like lie and be like, no, I'm not in it for the money. And like, trust me, I say that all the time too. Until you need to like pay your bills, and like it sucks
Pay
when
your
ETH is
bills.
at,
Yeah.
where it is. It was a lot cooler when ETH was at 4,300.
Yeah. Now, creator fees can get silly sometimes, 5% like at every secondary market sell and resell, but like that's not normally what it is. Do we have any idea? Do you guys have a sentiment of like what the average creator fee is?
I'd say like
It,
1 to 3.
I was
1
gonna
to
say
3?
about three. Most projects that I see are usually between 3 and 5. I see smaller, like individual, less blue chip projects are closer to the 1.5% range. So it kind of depends on the
Like
project.
maybe I'm weird, but like if I'm spending an ETH on a project, I do not care. And it's right now $1,600. I do not care if I'm spending 16 to 42 in creator fees. Like, do you think this is that big of an incentive?
For traders, yes, because margins are really thin right now. And when you're talking about a market that's generally low liquidity right now, you that little bit of fees makes a huge difference.
I also think this is an opportunity. I mean, NFTs is a massive term. It's non-fungible tokens, but they can represent, so many different types of assets. I think what I'm
True.
excited for coming out of this is the increased competition between the marketplaces, because I think we'll start to see niches again of certain marketplaces focused on certain types of digital assets. And I honestly, I believe that type of competition will be healthier for the entire environment. And you're going to see, Foundation. I think when Foundation came out, it was something crazy. Like, I think their fees were like 20%. They gave like 10% to the artists, and then they kept 10%. It was super high. But you're also dealing with Foundation marked itself out to be for extremely fine artists that were going to be, only selling things at multiple ETH, and that it wasn't a low, high volume trading, quantity over quality. No
Yeah.
pride.
Yeah. Well, and some of this is, watching DeGods and, well, all these projects really. It's almost like we're still searching for the viable business model that is in line with our ethos. So crypto comes out and we're like, we believe in our principles and damn the man and damn, laissez-faire and all this stuff. Like, it's total decentralized, degen land, and we're going to do something new. And the idea of setting a royalty fee, if you were going to ask for a 5% royalty fee, you better bring it when it comes to secondary sales. And you got these fat treasuries that keep topping off with every resell. That's cool, but we're realizing people are like, fuck that. You're not really even delivering on your underlying NFT promises. So then we're seeing fees drive down to 1%. Now we're seeing fees on secondary sales being optional. What it sounds to me like is we're just going back to the normal model. And so go ahead, Aussie. Tell me your peace of mind. What is that? You got squinty eyed and like, wait a minute.
I see. I'm gonna disagree. I think it has to do more with like the season and the market that we're in, and not necessarily with the business model. I mean, it, part of it's the business model, but part of it is really just it's the season in the market that we're in. We're in a season in the market where there isn't money, and so NFTs aren't moving, and so like it's and because the SEC's made it kind of really difficult to do a Series A or a Series B type round for anyone in the NFT space, like if they are trying to build a viable business, if they're trying to launch an IPTV show or whatever they're trying to build, they can't really go for a Series A or a Series B round of funding from VCs. It's really hard, especially if they're in the US. And so you're kind of reliant on that marketplace volume at the moment to be able to do any of those things. If you're a normal business, you can go get a loan from your bank to help build season 2 or the next upgrade of the expansion of your factory. NFTs don't have that. They don't have that ability right now because of the regulatory space. And so you do need to make sure you're generating at least some secondary volume sales during this bear market so that you can keep funding that building that you're doing.
Why fight so hard against being a regular business model?
I mean, a lot of them there are a bunch that are trying to build a regular
I want to hear
business model.
Jack.
Go for it, Jackie.
Why is anybody in Web3? I mean, everybody comes from Web2 to Web3 with like, they put their armor
promise
on.
and a
Like, we're gonna
dream.
fight. Yeah, I think there's lots of reasons to reimagine, the next industrial revolution and what we're going through. And ultimately, I mean, to Aussie's point, though, this is kind of what I want to say. Like, yes, you're right. Traditional money isn't necessarily available for these types of projects. So what do NFT projects do? We're going to have a DAO. We're going to have governance. There's a roadmap. There's going to be a game. There's always going to be like a next thing to engage that community. And I mean, I always see these creator royalties and these treasuries that build up. if you're going to do it in crypto, you have to have like the right business professionals around that are in the DAO. I mean, Bankless is a perfect example of this. A DAO that came out, it was people in the community that were like, hey, I've got this skill, I've got this skill, I've got this skill. Let's start consulting with businesses. Let's start like actually building this out. So that's what I'm excited for. I mean, I think that's what all of this is bringing up. OpenSea putting this buzz out. People are talking about NFTs again. People are going to start talking about roadmaps again. People are going to start talking about DAOs again. What does this NFT do? So you can start to internally generate, whether it's directly fiat money or whether it's crypto or whether it's just energy in general, you can start seeing that form in these teams again. And then you can start pushing, the regulation and that environment, because that's already, like you said, Grant, that already exists. Like the way of doing things already exists. So we're either, like look at DeFi. It's like, okay, we've got this new tool that can do this, but how can we just upgrade TradFi? And that was never like, and so there's a middle ground in between all of that, because, we all have exactly that, business professionals too. Everyone has their niche. If you work with money and this has been your track in life, you see it differently than people who are brand managers and things like that.
Yeah. You raise a really killer point. And Aussie, I want to come back to our thoughts about Batsy, because he actually had an interesting model in terms of introducing VC into Web3, because it is a major component, a VC ecosystem that understands Web3 enough to mitigate what appears to be significant risk. But Jackie, you really got at something there. How a DAO ideates. I guess the thing that I am personally growing supremely tired of is someone saying, you know what can make us a ton of money? A DAO. And that's what starts the DAO. But you just mentioned Bankless, and the iteration of that DAO was, hey, I've got this skill, I got this skill, I got this skill. How can we move forward in a way where we're all taken care of, but throw these skills together? And and it's like, oh, well, dang, like DAOs, like let's just do that. And it's like, oh, that makes sense. The skills are already there. The architecture's already there, albeit in a decentralized DAO way. But most DAOs aren't done that way. There's someone with an idea who tried to form it like an entity, like an LLC, in order to raise member money, but don't really have any skills or team or lawyers or bankers or anyone with any real experience behind it, except hype and a vision. And the rest will come. And it's like, this is what I'm getting at with like DeGods. And it's like, it's not a sustainable business. And I don't mean a business model. I mean, it's not a sustainable business, because he didn't come out and say in his one apology, I'm replacing myself with a CEO who's got experience. I'm replacing myself, or we're adding to the team, an operations expert or somebody who's going to give this some salt. And so I guess that's my critique. So that would lead me around to a question that we asked on this Twitter space to either of you. And Jackie, I kind of know what your go-to answers will be, but I wonder if there's others also. And that is, what DAOs iterated because people with talents shook hands and said, dude, I think that I could do this and you could do that and it could make something better. So therefore, let's start a DAO. As opposed to, what could be a great labor thing? A DAO. Yeah. And there's no real experience behind it. Go ahead.
Honestly, the Bankless is probably the most. I mean, you guys are going to permissionless. I'm so jelly. But I mean, like Bankless is probably the best example. And there's a group called Y Whales. I shared them with you, Grant, and anyone out there. Look up Y Whales. They're business people talking the business of Web3, I think is their tagline. But I have listened to every one of their podcasts. They're bringing together VCs, developers, all sorts of people. In their episode, I'll look up and find which one it was, but their episode with Ryan Anderson from Bankless, I mean, they were very transparent about like, this started on Discord and we had this idea and we went forward with this. And now, it's crazy where they've gotten to. And then, there's a big jump between DAOs that are spun up by like people Aussie's age or younger and then people that are seasoned and older and have like these battle wounds. And I mean, I think that kind of what you're hitting on, Grant, like some people don't, and not even some people, I mean, like it's tough to wrap your head around programmable money, which is what a token is. Like we can program money now to do things, lots of different things, whatever. And to your point, Grant, like a lot of people are like, okay, well, program it to do what it used to do, or like program it with
Yeah.
the program we have.
Yeah.
And there, but then you have, you know, the devs out there, and Web3 has been a development protocol driven space for this entire time. We haven't hit that inflection point of user experience yet. So we're still in like the developer vision land, which is we could do this, we could do this, we could do this, we could program it to do this, we could program it to
Yeah.
let's get animals involved. Like, I mean, like there's so many, we're still there. We haven't like, and until you can get mass, you know, I hate this term mass adoption, but until you can eventually, that's the system that's going to win, is the one the most people gravitate to use.
Yeah.
So that, you know, and I don't know what that's going to be yet.
Well, and you just made a really good point. Like, I think about web design. You talk about programmable money, and I guess I don't want to go back to the traditional system. I want to build into the promise of Web3, but I myself have been so vastly, tremendously underwhelmed at what has been delivered that
But look
I'm
at
like,
the juggernaut you're up against. I mean, literally, when you say the old system, like, are you referring to like fractional reserve banking?
no, not even the banking component. I, lo- this is he's talking about my wood paneling. Jarrett, it's not my Satoshi shed.
Satoshi shed.
I'm up in the woods of North Carolina about to pull out my Oklahoma. It's too soon for that. No, I'm not talking about fractional reserve banking. I'm talking about the basics. I mean the uttermost basics. Can we make like we talk about mass adoption and user experience, and in web design it works like this. This is how you dev in web design. You sit down and you come up with a web page and it's white, it's blank. And everyone's like, we could make it do this, 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 and this. And as a disciplined developer and coder, you do hello world. Hello world means, can I just get the text in Times New Roman black to appear on the front end called hello world? And when it comes to crypto, I feel like maybe we dabbled in a little bit of that with just tokens, and we have some liquidity, we have some currency. It's doing what the old system has done. But then we went to developer imagination land, and now it's like all this other stuff, and the in-between is what my heart craves. Like, can I go anywhere, and use my ETH for what it was OG original, not ETH, but my crypto tokens, just for what we originally said we could do. And it's like, well, that's mass adoption, and that's like a big hurdle. And I know because it's a paradigmatic hurdle, but no, I'm not talking about fractional reserve banking, Jackie. I'm like you've said more than once, it's harder to do this. And that is not the point of technology. The point of technology is it should be easier to do this, but we are in the dev stage. And so maybe we've been promised too much too soon. I don't know. What's your smart? Go ahead, Jared, or Aussie, sorry.
I was going to say we're in the dev stage. And so it's like, yeah, you were trying to program hello world was the first thing you were trying to do. But we're now trying to figure out, well, we've got all of these other components now. How do we make all of that work and communicate properly? And so, yes, it's gonna be harder at first. It's like when Apple started, things were originally harder with Apple, and then slowly they got things to be better and easier to use. But that's just how things work. That's how tech
But they
evolves.
fund it on a traditional funding model. And I guess maybe that's what I'm coming to. Like, I wish there was salt in the executive suite of these companies, because it's like we are trying to do two things. We're trying to bring cutting edge technology and live by a cutting edge ethos. But pragmatism says you can't have both. You got to start with something. And if you're going to try to make a massive technological breakthrough with Web3, you need to set yourself up to go out and at least start with traditional financing. Apple's a great example. They sold stock, yet they revolutionized so much technology. but we're trying to do both at once, shove a basketball through a hose, it feels like. And I'm like, could we just like cool our jets and do things more traditional? I guess, Jackie, that's kind of what I was thinking about. But you smirked. Oh, go ahead, Aussie. What?
I was gonna say, just because a lot of these teams aren't traditional, that's the problem. Like that's the thing. You're not talking to 20, like a group of devs who all went to Harvard together, who know their friend from the VC who was in business school that they used to get drunk with on Friday, and they go over to his house on a Friday night and say, "Hey, can I have some VC funding?" Like, "Hey, you know me, we're good. We both went to Harvard together. Give me some bucks." That's not who these teams are. You might have a dev with a special skill set in South Korea, another dev with a skill set in Northern Europe, someone else with dev skills in Colombia or somewhere else. And so they're not a traditional team, so they don't qualify for most traditional businesses because they're not located in the US, or they're not all located in Europe. They're not a traditional team. And it takes people, because Web3 has all of these special skill sets that are required to work in it. You don't have centralized teams all from Harvard. You might have some guy who learned how to code on his own in his basement, but because he got so into Web3, he learned something really particular about Web3 coding, and therefore is the perfect guy for the job. But when you go to a VC, they're like, what's his qualifications? What's he worth? And they're going to say nothing because he doesn't have some big degree from some big university.
He could pull out a ZK proof and say, look at all I've done. But Jackie, what were you thinking when Aussie said that about partying late at night at the same college?
Well, I mean, I think, I'm very fortunate to have an MBA. I didn't think that was going to happen in my life. And, my former employer put me through this program. It was amazing. I got an MBA from it. And what I really learned in that experience was like, oh, this is how the world works. This is how money drives supply chain. This is how demand drives market forces, all that stuff. And I didn't. So, I mean, I hear you, Aussie, and I meet with people from all spectrums of business acumen or whatever. And I think kind of what Grant said to begin this topic, you have these polar opposites of these seasoned business executives are like, why can't these damn kids just do it this way? It would be so easy. The tech exists. Let's just shove it. And then you have the younger people that are like, we have an opportunity to do this totally different. So there is a meeting in the middle that does need to happen. I think that's where regulation ideally exists, which is, it's this, we trust certain people to regulate things. Maybe we're, post everything the world's been through in the past couple of years, people are starting to, because of the internet, because we can all interact differently and talk to people in different countries. And, I think that's the difference maker in this revolution that we're going through right now, is that we all, the majority of us can freely talk to one another and ideate. And we didn't have that ability, in the last industrial revolution.
And you raise a great point. And the first thought I have is we should start MentorDAO and just answer that question. Because you're right. There is a meeting of the middle, and I don't want to stifle the spirit of Web3. I want it to live. But also, you gave a great counter here with these international teams. That is a valid point that, they're a non-traditional. And my whole point is, when you have so many things that are new, so many models that are non-traditional, those are vectors for failure. And in a business, you look for vectors of failure because they're not proven. So as a business that starts, if your vector for failure is that we're a distributed team doing things in a Web3 ethos, great. Okay, pick that. Now make your product Web 2. Make something because you're already pioneering something. Create some traction and some revenue, some real earned income, and make progress and start to develop that business. Or If you're like, no, I want to create breakthrough in the Web3 space and I want to double dip on a business model that is unproven. And by unproven, I simply mean remote workers now. The data is very mixed on whether or not it's more productive or less productive, actually helpful. Decentralized work, is it actually a more productive model? It's an inspiring one. It's an empowering one, but it is not yet proven that it's an effective one. Like we actually move things forward and create viable revenue models. Yes, there's always outliers. What about this one time I heard this one thing? And it's like, okay, yes, there are outliers, but what does the data across the board say? And it's mixed. Go ahead.
Okay, I think there's one thing that I think there's some parts of Web3 that aren't trying. We're in the dev stage, so we're not trying necessarily to generate that business model that'll create $1 million for that VC. Like that, some of the tech is, hey, we're trying to build this thing so that it works and so that it can help Web3. And basically they're like, they go get crowdfunding either via token or otherwise to like, hey, help us build this so that it can be used in Web3, basically for anyone to use it. And that's all it is. A VC won't be interested because a VC, there's not a very clear, here's $1 million, because we're in the dev stage and we're at the development stage of Web3. And so unless you're building something that's Web 2.5, you aren't building a model that a VC wants. You need to be building something that's Web 2.5 to get
That's good.
to get a VC.
And I think, Jackie, that's kind of the net result of what you're talking about. There's this meeting. Go ahead.
You know, my mom has a great expression. She always says, you can't put a wise head on young shoulders. And what I've learned specifically in this space is I've worked on lots of projects that didn't go anywhere. You know, they had great ethos. We had great people. Everything was like stacked and it didn't hit the mark for one reason or the other. And honestly, my personal takeaway from a lot of this has been, when you don't consider the wisdom of generations of people that have been doing business, however that looks, you will run into the same problems they ran into 30 years ago, 50 years ago. Humankind as a species, we kind of just deal with the same issues. We output it a little differently. It feels a little different. There's different buttons to push, but essentially the actions we take and how we use technology, how we use anything, has been pretty historically recorded. So I think there's like a whole middle ground even in this whole conversation that we're all kind of agreeing on. And it's, how are people really going to use this stuff? And, I don't know, like you can have all these bright ideas, but again, you're going to run into these same, regulation exists and things can get too much red tape. They can get over-regulated 100%. But, it exists because people have been scamming each other since the beginning of time. So,
yeah. Well,
yeah.
And also the argument about VCs, like I think about that, Aussie, and it's on the surface, it's a very valid point and a frustrating one for young developers, especially, to be like, nobody gets it. Or if we build it, they might come eventually, but this is so new. We're all so early that the component I'm building, it doesn't plug into the component it needs to plug into for another 5 years. So it's just a thankless job and we're just doing this thing. And I hear that. VCs, there is plenty of money with VCs. The problem, if for even this early, I'm telling you, I speak to 2 VCs on the regular who have an excess of 10 million each. And their constant complaint to me is the people deving this refuse to put this in language that I can understand. They refuse because it's too out there. He goes, there's never been a technology that's too out there for my money. He said every technological iteration that has happened, there's always a moment when people argue, this is so far ahead, we can't position this and you won't like the appeal of the ROI. A VC is made to risk. They know that that is what they're signing up for, is massive risk. But if we can't articulate a valuable ROI, that in itself is not the purity of the philosophy. That in itself is the bridge that I think we need to cross. And when we have something that we can pitch to a VC, to Jared's asking me a question here, and I'm answering it with this. He says, what's one specific thing you have a gripe with? Well, several. But in this case, my argument is to answer what you're saying, Aussie. If someone is working on a project that is so special and valuable to the ecosystem that they have to work thanklessly for it, it's worth it to a VC because it's that integral to the future. And if it's that integral to the future, I would absolutely risk it. Take a time out, take a knee, and explain this to me in terms of ROI. And if it's like, well, I can't explain it ROI, then you need to second guess whether or not it's actually as integral as you think it is. And that dynamic, it is a push and pull. It does sound like you're an old fuddy-duddy coming from previous gens. And like, well, I'm also been doing, umpteen deals and I know what I'm talking about. So like, let's figure out.
But to your point, Grant, I think we're at the point, and I'm just going to plug this Why Whales podcast again with the Bankless folks. We, as people in this space, we have to start talking about the capabilities of this technology and not the build of this technology, and myself included. I've gone out and I've educated tons of different groups on what blockchain is, infrastructure wise, what the change means. But I haven't spoken to the actual capabilities of how this is going to change our lives and what it's going to look like. I mean, that's what VCs want. What's the story? What's the vision that you're casting? How does this look and feel if I put my money into it?
Interesting. I captured that. I like that's a good quote. And maybe that's the middle ground that old heads need to be more skilled at helping the devs.
Well, they got to get involved too. I mean, that's one thing I get sick of is just like people that want to do a project, but like don't want to get a wallet, don't want to like deal with tokens. Yeah. I'm like, jump in, homie, any point now.
Yeah. Jared says, Granny sound more and more like a maxi. I want to know what I said to make me sound more like a maxi. Allison says, I see many leading at the moment, and they have never managed and led anything before. Business needed within the mix. And my question is, how would it look? I agree with this, and I think some of the old heads, me and Jackie and Allison, are agreeing on this. What would be the best way for old heads to step in and support without stifling the creative vision? Because I do believe most of what's being built is absolutely integral. I do. But I think I could speak more to the capabilities than even the developers sometimes, as opposed to like, how cool is it that we're doing it this way? So what would be a healthy way for old heads to step in and support?
For me, I think it's, I think of that song, The Children Are the Future, teach them well and let them lead. God. No, but teach them well and let them lead. Like seasoned old heads, we need to share our experience in a way that's not berating and in a way that's empathetic, that, hey, I was young and, like optimistic and I had all these ideas and like, I don't want to stifle that. I want to let you do it. Like, just like a parent, you have to give that child room to experiment, and they're going to fall and they're going to get back on the bike, and you have to have patience. I think old heads need soft skills. They need emotional intelligence, which is not something we were brought up with. That is not something that was drilled into our schooling and our institutionalized lives. But now the younger people, even what they're demanding from HR and they're good to demand those things, I think, it's this mix of like, people need to be happy with what they're doing and they need to feel fulfilled. And that's what's going to continue to like inspire the momentum. And if you just beat young people up,
it sounds like you're trying to stop the future or taint it.
Yeah, like,
go ahead, Aussie.
Grant, like the way that you're talking about is essentially like, let me do this. I know how to do it. Like, you're not Aussie. You don't know what you're doing. So step aside. And that's kind of the perspective. Like when I've been listening to you talk, that's how you come off. and
Mm.
you
Spicy.
and I and the reality is we need to be more talking about how do community members, how do old heads step in supporting roles and let these young people lead rather than, hey, step aside, I know what I'm doing, I'll put you through the traditional system, let's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'll run this. I'll run the business. What you should be telling Frank D Gods is not, hey, I've you should have hired a COO or a CEO. You should have gotten a mentor who's maybe been a CEO who can step in and help guide D Gods through this process.
Yeah. Yeah.
That should be the conversation you're having, not Frank saying,
Mm.
hey, get out. I'm stepping aside. I'm getting out of here. I'm going to let this old guy lead
Mm-hmm.
in a space that he doesn't necessarily understand fully, or he didn't help create. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's a different conversation, and I think part of what Jackie said about the soft skills is super important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. No, it's well said. Jarrett says if someone builds something thanklessly that can add value, then VCs would be interested. I.e., every time Jared writes IE, I literally think it's LE, like French, like Le
That's what I
BlackRock.
thought too.
Yeah, but it's IE BlackRock. While not a VC, they're there for the money. And Aussie, I would say yes. Yeah, my tone is very brash, mainly because I want it to succeed, and there's a stubbornness happening on all sides. And you're right. The empathy should come in. Now, whether or not Frank Degod should step aside or whether he should have a mentor, um, that could be up for debate too. I guess you're right, but I would need to be more nuanced in my approach of saying there has to be some salt and pepper hair somewhere in the mix. Whether they're being, a supporting role, whether they're administrative assistants, whether they're the actual CEO, who knows? But you're right. There does need to be nuance and sensitivity to it. So that's a killer call out for sure. Um,
Can I say one
Jared said,
thing
okay,
to
please.
Jared's last comment? I mean, I think it would help us all to recognize like money is an industry. They have money is products. Money is, um financial professionals exist because money is the thing they build with, they move around, they offer, they resell different types of money labeled different things. So if we, I wouldn't be so quick to um like knock on BlackRock. I mean, they're an underpinning for a lot of the chaos that we organize in the world. And I'm not saying good or bad or like them, love them, none of that. Just probably the most healthy thing all of us could do is recognize that everyone has a role. Every industry has a role, a function, a thing they do, a class
Mm,
of people they serve. And so, really, like, ideally this would be peace on earth, as if we all recognized each other's strengths and weaknesses and also
mm.
had entire departments dedicated to helping people through their weaknesses. I mean, that's something we, again, us old heads, quote unquote, I'm not totally going there, I have gray hair but I'm young, everyone out there. But that's something that we weren't necessarily brought up with like that, you know.
And you raise a valid point, and I wonder if people who are more seasoned in business, if they could be more nuanced by treating the monetary side of business as its own product. Because, for example, Aussie's right. Let's say Frank D. Gods has a project that he built, he knows it inside and out, and he needs to outsource some of the art to a graphic designer. And he's got an internal chief art officer, chief creative officer that he knows, likes, and trusts. And he's going through that chief creative officer because that person knows how to project manage designers. And he trusts this person to see his vision, and he delegates that. Similarly, to undergird Aussie's point about gray hairs, the reason I refer to gray hairs and the reason this correlates to Jackie's comment about money is the industry of money takes decades to learn. It's intricate by design. And so it's not that they're gray hairs that they're better. It's gray hairs that they've put in the decades that they know the industry of money. And that is its own product. So yeah, maybe there's even a role that's like chief monetary officer or chief monetary advisor. And they would be reportable to someone like a Frank D. Godds. And Frank D. Godds would trust that this person understands my vision, but they have the experience to understand that someone needs to speak into our business, at least in part. It's not all about money, but at the C-suite level, someone in the group's got to raise a flag and say, that's a viable model, that's not a viable model, and that's going to cause you problems, or this isn't going to cause you problems. But in the end, you do you, boys. I mean, maybe there's got to be some sort of balance like that. And Jarrett clarifies he's not saying anything negative. In fact, if anything, I think he was saying what you were saying, Jackie, that we can't overlook the elephant in the room, as it were. Jarrett makes a point about consensus. Consensus stage speakers were roughly 40 plus on average. And 40 plus in tech is old when you're visiting Silicon Valley. Oh, that's what he's saying, why Aussie needs to
dye my hair.
Dye your hair a little salt and pepper. Yeah.
Give me a sec. My garage is calling me. I'll be back in 2 seconds.
Yeah. Jarrett goes on to say, Grant is describing Game of Thrones Master of Coin. Littlefinger, Master of Coin. Did you watch Game of Thrones, Jackie?
Absolutely not.
There's a character, and they are the Master of Coin. Basically, they're the treasurer, and they are devious, to say the least. So where does that put us? So we've got a plan of action for Frank D. Godds, but like, where are you most hopeful? Where have you seen a good, healthy mix of experience and ambition, of age and youth?
I've seen
What
a couple
groups
of
have
Pepe.
you seen?
Pepe is, oddly enough, actually was created by a mix of old heads and new kids. Like the team is actually like surprisingly like not just a bunch of 15-year-olds thinking, "Oh, Pepe's a meme. Let's make a meme."
Really?
Yeah. I mean, that is one example that I've got that's come out of this.
Do I still hold Pepe? I need
I
need to see if I'm still holding any Pepe. What in the world?
So that's just like one of them.
That's too funny.
And then actually, I'll show an NFT project that I'm a part of, and I think is really cool. They're having a huge party at 3 p.m. today because their miners are going online today. But they're a mix of, I mean, younger guys, probably mid 30s, early 30s, and a few guys in their late 40s and 50s, and they launched an NFT project where they're got a huge mining facility in Bitcoin mining facility in Paraguay. That the first container of miners is going live today, so they're having a huge party for it. And then they're also mining anti-money, or refining anti-money, which is a mineral, and they're doing that because one of their team members, or actually relative of one of their team members, was from that industry and very familiar with the area, and was like, hey, there's an opportunity here because of where you guys are thinking setting up the site, that we can actually take advantage of both these industries and kind of combine to increase the efficiency and the potential return of what you guys are doing. And it's a combination.
Is this a project you've been talking about for a while? Weren't you looking at minting?
Yeah, I minted 2 of them. So I minted a couple of these NFTs, and they've been like slowly building in the background, waiting for the miners to arrive in Paraguay, and making sure they've secured all their sites and everything. And they're launching. They started mining. They're starting mining this afternoon, 3 p.m. Eastern time. They're having a huge party on their Discord, and so I'm excited to go because I know one of the founders, and I think it's gonna be like, it's a perfect example of a team that's both experienced, and they went through all the legal pathways to make sure that they weren't doing anything illegal. They're legally registered in Paraguay and a whole bunch of other things. And so I would say that's a perfect example of a mix.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Jackie, do you have any examples of a good mixed team?
Um,
Age-wise, experience-wise?
I actually was just looking one up that I liked a little bit ago, and their website's not working. So I'm like, in the NFT space, you're like, oh, that team broke up. Oops, I guess that's not going anywhere. Things can change so quickly. So I don't have one right now to speak about. But I will. I am going to put a sort of list together. I am totally preparing for an NFT like bull run. I know this is again like antithetical to the movement or whatever, but we've all been in it and it feels great once in a while to have one of those NFTs you can flip and whatever. So I think it's going to be important for voices like us and people in the industry to talk more about projects and things that we can guide people to. And hey, check out their roadmap. Unfortunately, I mean, a lot of the projects I was involved in 2021, 2022, they didn't make it, not going to make it. They didn't make it. So, but maybe we can even learn from them. And a lot of them went on to end up, helping major brands and major companies right now. They're working all at recognizable places to implement Web3.
Yeah.
So, people got to pay bills. They have houses, they have kids, they have it. That's life.
Grant doesn't have any of those. He's just got his Satoshi shack.
Yeah.
I do have houses. And I do have kids. I treat my employees like my family, man.
I treat them like kids.
Yeah, I thought he was about to say that. I was just like, Grant.
I caught it. I said family. That's pretty cool. I would love to see that list. And what is making you believe so strongly in an NFT boom? Aussie, are you on board with that? Are you thinking?
Not till January, probably. Maybe slightly earlier in the fall, but I don't think before October. We're in for a little bit of pain before we're in for the game.
Financial advice, of course, for the record. Not financial advice. We're in for a little bit. Yeah, you were calling for like a $1,300 ETH. There's more pain coming. Jackie, do you have a timeline roughly that you're thinking?
The time is not for us to know. I would always think that, but I guess to me, it just is the next step in the digital asset space. I mean, NFTs have to get figured out. It has to be, crypto's on its way. With what's gone on with the institutional investment and stuff like that. NFTs are kind of fair game right now. I mean, again, not financial advice, but I mean, for anybody looking to get some short-term gains, there's a lot of people in Web3. Why does Jackie only speak in riddles? That's how I get invited back to things. Never give them the answer, Jared. No, I'm just kidding. I don't have the answers. But yeah, like I think, we need, personally, I just feel we need this injection and we need this, and I'm not saying we need it right now. I'm not saying we need it, I just think there's people in Web3 that have been hanging on by a thread, and it would help to have capital.
Yeah. And I think when it happens, some of it will be projects we know, some of it will be projects we've never heard of, for sure. I think doodles will be around. I keep saying that, and they're so far they've been a drama-free group, and you know what? They've got a whole array of creatives and developers, but also business owners and marketers that just run the whole spectrum of age and experience. And I have a lot of respect for what they've put together in their mission, but I don't know. Any other projects you're watching closely that will be on your list, Jackie?
Well, I will say too, we there's an important component we haven't talked about yet, and that's like the hardware catching up with the software and all that. When we start to really blow out these experiential, events and things like that, when the screens catch up, when AR catches up, I mean, that's where you're going to see NFTs really make a lot more sense. Yeah, Grant, when are you buying a doodle? I know we just keep talking about this project. We were talking about going all in on one, Jarrett.
Yeah, let's just all throw in. It's almost time. I mean, now there's 4 not crypto bros. So like, it's time. I mean,
it's
like $400
only a quarter ETH, a little more than a quarter ETH each.
Yeah. Well, guys, we're at the top of the hour. We made it here and talked hopefully about something of import. Actually, I think we were DAO structures, from DAO structures and NFT structures to like old heads pushing their way into rooms they shouldn't be. Any shout outs today, guys?
I want to give a shout out to Y Whales. I've met with some of the people there. Just like, please check their podcast out. Just every single episode is so enlightening for everything we talked about today. I mean, these are people really trying to do business. They're trying to be innovative, creative, business minded, and like they've highlighted some of the best projects I've ever learned about. Whether that, I learned about Fireblocks through them, which is an asset manager. Just crazy. Yeah. Y Whales, check them out.
Aussie, got any shout outs today?
No, I don't. I'm gonna thank Allison again for our awesome space, and I'm gonna shout out. I'm gonna shout out young people in Web3, rather, because they can do it. You don't need Grant.
This is Grant. Shout out to Aussie for standing up for the young generation. Definitely grit. And I do shout out the young people. I shout out the young people for keep the spirit alive, but also know there are people around you that want you to succeed and have help for you. And it might sound like it's coming out of left field, but it's actually made in many instances or crafted for your success. It really is out there. And whether or not it's me, there's old heads out there.
I'm going to shout out really old people. We need the octogenarians back in. If 40
have you guys
is old, like, man, I can't imagine being 70 or 80 right now. Just being like, forget it. Bye.
Now, 40s are old heads. We're not old. We're old heads. I think once you get to like, but like, there's got to be somebody.
I'm not in my
space.
40s.
Oh, dang.
I'm saying it
right.
out to everyone out there.
Yeah. Grant, you're the only one in their 40s here.
You're right. But there's got to be someone. There's a gal I follow in the athletic Instagram called Granny Guns. And she's this granny who just lifts, and she's so cute, and she's just so fun. And she lifts just to stay in shape, and she's met Arnold and all these people. She's super fun. But, like, I wonder who the crypto granny is. Like, I want to... What is that, Grant, though? What? All right, everybody, you can follow us. Are we going to be on Twitter Spaces next week? On Tuesday? Is that the plan?
Yeah, on Tuesday, yeah.
On Tuesday, we're going to be on Twitter Spaces. Friday, we're going to be live here and everywhere else. Follow Jackie Roach at whelmness.com. Follow Aussie at Decentralized News. Greetings. Any career advice? Well, we're at the top of the hour, Gustavo. Unfortunately, we could give you, hit us up, DM us, and we'll give you some career advice, or maybe we'll go live on one of our other shows when we've got more time. I'm Grant Sparks. You guys, thanks for checking in with Not Crypto Bros.